What is with small woodland creatures and throwing out trash damage in hero shooters anyway? Whether you're a Junkrat or a Squirrel Girl, your job is the same. Lob some bombs in the general direction of your opponents and hope for the best. I'm going to be talking about Squirrel Girl in this video, but first, why do we call it trash damage anyway? Well, you've got to think about the economy of resources divided among the team, and the values most relevant here are damage, healing, and ultimate charge. Each team can only do so much damage and healing, and this is affected primarily by the hero choices between both teams. Ultimate charge is a resource that is constantly increasing by doing either damage or healing, and both teams are trying to increase ult charge faster than the other team. When there's a hero like Squirrel Girl on the field, you've got tons of damage going out that's largely unfocused, meaning you're just hitting whoever you can in hopes of taking off a chunk of health, and hopefully scoring an elimination if you're lucky. However, while those are big damage hits, the downside of this type of damage is that it's big enough to cause panic and make the person who got hit run and take cover, and more importantly, get the attention of the healer. And when the healer recovers that large portion of health lost, they get a large boost to their ultimate charge in return. So, most of the time against a good healer, the damage done by Squirrel Girl is immediately healed, feeding the healer/strategist a bunch of ult charge, making it basically meaningless for the Squirrel Girl's team, which is why it's called trash damage. It's damage that did not lead to an elimination and only fed the healer ultimate charge. And prior to Season 1, this made Squirrel Girl a pretty awful hero pick in Marvel Rivals. Sure, it was bad that she was feeding the enemy healer's ultimate charge, but she was also feeding herself ultimate charge with the damage she's doing, right? But for what? And this leads to the question, whose ultimate is more impactful, Squirrel Girl's or the enemy healer's? Prior to Season 1, the answer was clear. The Luna or Mantis ult was much more impactful than the Squirrel Girl ultimate. I'm pretty sure we all had that experience early in our Marvel Rivals career too. We heard the ultimate voice line like, "Squirrel Stampede!" and it made us put our guard up like, I better be careful, I don't know what that thing does. Then we casually sidestep it as it approaches like, yeah, I still don't know what that thing does, but it doesn't seem very important. So yeah, in Season 0, the trade-off between Squirrel Girl and the enemy healer ultimates were absolutely not worth it. But in Season 1, they buffed Squirrel Girl's ultimate so that it bounces off walls towards the nearest enemy hero. It does the same damage as before and actually has less hit points as well. Yes, you can apparently attack and destroy her ultimate, but honestly, why would you? It's probably a better idea to prioritize attacking the enemy players. But is this good? Well, that depends on the situation. If it's a wide open space, her ultimate is just as bad as before. In a cramped space, her ultimate might be quite impactful. It certainly seems better in my experience so far. We'll have to see how it goes as the season progresses. Next, I'll talk about when you should be using Squirrel Girl and how her kit is best utilized. But first, if you're liking the video, please like and consider subscribing. I feel like it's been years since I've had this much fun playing a game, and I'll definitely be putting a lot more content out as the season progresses. Oh, and stick around until the end and I'll tell you the simple thing that pro teams do to avoid trash damage. So, when should you use Squirrel Girl? I personally think she's a great pick on convoy matches on defense. That's where you push the payload or the enemy's pushing the payload and you're trying to stop it. Especially on the Tokyo map where the payload lowers down for the attackers, that one's great. And also the new map, Midtown, set in the New York streets. These maps have lots of places where the enemy is tightly grouped between walls, and you can make the best use of her primary fire and ultimate. Your ideal positioning as Squirrel Girl during battle is the middle of the pack, behind your tank, but in front of your healer. You want to be close enough to make your attacks as easy as possible and have the highest chance of hitting your rooting ability, Squirrel Blockade. Her main attack, Burst Acorn, does 110 damage, no headshots, and will bounce up to 2 times before exploding. If it hits the ground, then hits the ground again, it will explode. If it hits a wall, then the floor, it will bounce again for a very short distance, then explode. If it hits a wall, the next place it will hit will explode, no matter what, whether it's a floor or a wall. Wait, why does this matter? Vertical positioning, that's why. Check this out. When I'm attacking at ground level, straight on, my shots are very predictable, as they only bounce a short distance, then explode. So, when we're at ground level, we just attack at the feet when close, then aim higher as we get further away. Now, look what happens when I get high ground. These Acorn bombs are bouncing way farther, leading to a much more unpredictable shot. Against moving enemies, you'll have a much harder time hitting them with any AoE at all, let alone direct hits. It reminds me of putting in golf. You only hit the ball hard enough to go about a foot past the hole, you know what I mean? But anyway, you want to use a similar strategy here, making sure the explosions happen near the enemies even if you miss. For this reason, I think it's better to stay low to take advantage of the reduced bounce distance before the shots explode. This desired position in the middle of your team between the tank and healer also helps body block the healers, which is one more layer of defense for them. Which brings me to another ability of hers, Tail Bounce. It's a big jump with an 8-second cooldown, and you can even do it when you're already in the air. I use this mostly for getting away after taking damage, as I'm temporarily harder to hit when bouncing up. I don't recommend using it to get high ground for attacks because, as I mentioned, those bounces of the primary attack are super unpredictable when attacking from above your opponents. If she had a grenade launcher that exploded on impact, high ground would be perfect, but she doesn't. I would stay low to get the more predictable bounces. If you figured out some sort of tech to prove me wrong here, please let me know in the comments. I would love to up my squirrel game by unlocking more strategies for her. Now let me run through the rest of these abilities, starting with Squirrel Blockade. Charge up this attack to increase the velocity when thrown, and if it hits, it does 35 damage and roots the enemy for 1.33 seconds. Basically, I use this on cooldown mid-fight to lock down opponents and make them easier to hit for myself and my team. It's also great for countering dive heroes, as you can almost guarantee 2 direct hits with your primary attack after locking them down at close range. Mammal Bond lets you use one of your other abilities without a cooldown, so you can essentially use it twice in a row. It's best to use Mammal Bond before you use the desired ability twice, not between the 2 uses of that ability. You'll see me get this wrong in the background gameplay because I didn't know this at the time, so I'll say it again. Use Mammal Bond first, then use the other ability twice in a row. I mostly use Mammal Bond to fire off 2 Squirrel Blockades in a row in a team fight. However, it can also be used for the Tail Bounce to do that twice in a row and get some crazy height for escaping. Like I said, attacking from high ground isn't really that great with her, but if you can make it work, go for it. Mammal Bond does not work with her team-up ability, Webbed Acorn, unfortunately. And that ability is pretty cool. Webbed Acorn has got a bit of a wind-up and a slight arc, but it will wrap up all enemies in its explosion radius for 1 second and do a respectable 80 damage. Obviously a great tool to have if you happen to have a Spider-Man on your team. Her ultimate is Squirrel Tsunami, and now it's actually quite useful. You first throw it a short distance, then it travels 9 meters per second, which is about as fast as Captain America can sprint during his ultimate. It does 150 damage and redirects towards the nearest enemy after hitting a solid object. No big tips here, as this ult's usefulness is pretty situational. Just try to aim it so that it hits a solid surface shortly after damaging an enemy. So, overall I think Squirrel Girl is a pretty solid pick in Season 1, especially on missions where you're trying to stop a payload from moving. And hey, if you liked this video or learned something, please consider liking and subscribing. But lastly, I promised a tip explaining how pro teams avoid trash damage. Well, they avoid trash damage by not letting damage go to waste. And they do that by calling out targets. If you ever watch pro matches with the audio on and the teammates talking to each other, you'll often hear them say something like, "Luna's won!" or "Mantis is won!" Which this literally translates to, "Hey, this enemy has 1 health." But it's generally used to just tell the team that an enemy is low on health. This directs the whole team to stop focusing on their current target and focus damage on that single target to secure the elimination. And as you know, in hero shooters, 1 elimination can turn a team fight. And that's all I got. Thanks a lot, and hope you enjoyed the video. Now go out there and eat nuts and kick butts. Is that what she says? Is that really what... I don't really know.
This is real firepower! You get away! Too sticky for you!
Too sticky for you!
Sticky for you!
We'll have to keep fighting until we have a winner. Hate you.
Woohoo!
Another
Kung Fu chop to Psylocke in her face to kill her. I know these characters love it when healers punch them to death, so I try to do that.
Oh,
Ooh, look at this MVP.
I don't think so.